In this video, we're going to take a look at 5 tips to drawing faster, and everybody wants to draw faster. The truth is that knowing a few secrets will help to improve your drawing skill and ironically improve your accuracy as well. So let's take a look at these real quickly and then we'll go into these in depth in a minute. First thing is to look for and draw the basic shapes that are observed in your subject. The second tip is to make comparisons within the picture plane of spatial relationships that happen there, and this includes the positive and negative space. The third tip is to draw with your whole arm. We're kind of accustomed to drawing with our wrist and our fingers, and we bring the whole arm into it. Lots of good things happen. The fourth tip is to use a different medium. Maybe you're using a medium that's not well suited for what you're trying to accomplish. And then the fifth tip is to omit any details that might not be necessary. So let's take a look at these more in detail. The first tip, of course, is to look for and draw shapes. What I mean by that is most of us have learned to draw by looking at the contour lines or the outlines of the subject. Instead, when we look at an object, we should try to find basic shapes that exist inside of that object and simplify the object that we're looking at down into those shapes. Then simply draw those shapes, piecing them together to build up the more complex object. This is what I'm doing here with the spray bottle. Now I know the spray bottle is not that overly complex, but it does have a little bit more complexity to it than, let's say, a sphere or something like that. So it makes it a little bit easier for you to see the simple shapes that I've broken this spray bottle down into. Now, this is just one instance of me drawing the spray bottle. If I was to draw the spray bottle again, I might see different shapes there and draw different shapes. So an artist might see an object differently each time they draw it. So in other words, this is not necessarily a formula, but a process of observation. Now, once I've got my simple shapes all pieced together to create the overall shape of the spray bottle, now I can go back and draw those contour lines and really focus on the line at this stage in the drawing. And since I'm focusing on line at this stage in the drawing, I can concentrate on creating some lines that are a little bit thicker and some lines that are a little bit thinner to create some line quality and variety in the drawing. I'm also a bit more confident with the marks now that I've established the basic shape of the spray bottle. Now, once we've got our lines established, we can go back and add just a bit of value here and there. This is a quick sketch, so I'm not going to put too much value on here, just a little indication of some darker areas and some lighter areas for contrast. Now, the second tip is to make comparisons within the picture plane. And what I mean by this is making comparisons between the positive and negative shapes that happen within the picture plane. For example, this is the photo reference that I'm using. I'm going to look at the distances that exist between the edges of the pear and the picture plane, and I'm going to try to match those as close as possible to my drawing. So as I'm laying out the drawing, I'm going to make these comparisons as I go. I'm going to try to make these comparisons very quickly. In fact, in this demonstration, I'm looking at 4 different areas. The distance from the pear on the right to the edge of the picture plane on the right, the distance from the top pear or the middle pear to the top of the paper, and the distance from the third pear, the left pear, to the left edge of the picture plane, as well as the bottom portion of the picture plane. This is going to help me quickly lay out my composition. I'm not going to get really pulled into what I'm drawing. Instead, I'm just looking at those little pieces, one piece at a time, concentrating on getting those accurate, and that's going to help me lay out my composition quickly. Then once I've got the pears laid out in this case, I can go back and add some of the details. Again, this is a quick sketch, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time developing this drawing, but I was able to get this information on the surface in a matter of a couple of minutes. Now, the third tip is to draw with your whole arm. It makes sense that we've become accustomed to drawing with our wrist and fingers because that's how we learn to write. And that's really good for creating letters when we write. But when you're creating a drawing, you don't necessarily have to be stuck to using your fingers and your wrist. Instead, you can use your entire arm and loosen up. So in the next set of shapes and the cylinder that I'm going to draw here, I'm going to loosen up and draw from my shoulder. And I'm kind of using the entire arm to make the marks here. Now, of course, I'm going to make more marks, which is actually going to improve the accuracy, and it's going to add a little bit of interest and variety to the drawing as well. But it's going to help me to draw quicker and make marks that are just a little bit looser, but ironically more accurate. So the third tip, again, is to draw with your whole arm. Don't be too stiff with your wrist and your fingers when you're making marks. Now, the fourth tip to improve your drawing speed is to use a different medium. And what I mean by that is to make sure that the medium you're using matches the desired outcome of what you're trying to do. For example, you might want to create a quick drawing, so therefore you should probably use a quick medium. Here I'm using a graphite pencil that has a sharp tip to draw a sphere, and I'm going to have to invest a certain amount of time here to create a fully rendered sphere, which this isn't a fully rendered sphere, but it does take me a couple minutes to complete. In comparison, however, if I grab a stick of compressed charcoal, I can get a lot of information on the surface in a very short amount of time. Charcoal is going to cover a larger surface area and allow me to create gradations of value much quicker than I could accomplish with the graphite. So sometimes just choosing a different medium is going to increase your drawing speed. All right, the fifth and final tip here is to omit details. Sometimes we get caught up in the details that are observed in the subject that we're drawing, and we spend too much time drawing those details. Now I'm going to loosely draw the features of a face here, and I'm just doing this for comparison purposes. It's going to take me actually longer to draw these features compared to what I'm going to do in just a moment. But I'm putting some information here as far as the details go. You know, the eyes have eyelids, and there's pupils, and there's nostrils in the nose, and you can see the eyebrows and so on. So it takes me a few minutes to do a drawing like this. Now, if I were to omit some of the details and instead concentrate on the overall values and shapes of those values, then I can get almost the same amount of information across to a viewer in a much shorter amount of time. So here I'm just going to draw the recesses of where the eyes are located, and maybe a bit of coarse shadow that might happen underneath the nose and a bit of cast shadow right underneath it. And then I'm going to add just a couple areas of shadow for the upper portion of the lip and then right underneath the bottom lip. And in a much shorter amount of time, we've been able to communicate the features of a face. So these are just 5 quick tips to drawing faster. Of course, you'll need to practice these to see any improvement, but probably if you keep these in mind, you'll see noticeable improvement right off the bat. And remember, these 5 tips were, first of all, to look for and draw the basic shapes, and this is especially true in any complex object you're trying to draw. Make comparisons within the picture plane between the areas of positive and negative space and the spaces in between objects too. And then the third tip, of course, was to draw with your whole arm. Try to use your shoulder to make marks instead of just your wrist and your fingers. And then the fourth tip was to try a different medium. Maybe the medium that you're using is not really conducive for what you're after. And then the fifth tip, of course, is to omit any details that can be omitted and still get your information across to your viewer.